So the way we prove who we are and what we're qualified for, our diplomas, our licenses, our actual identity, is really undergoing a revolution in the EU right now.
Oh, absolutely. Our sources are calling it a fundamental disruption.
And it's all being driven by the new European Digital Identity Wallet, the EUDI framework.
It's a huge foundational change. I mean, if you're an organization that issues any kind of official document, a government agency, a university, a big bank, you now have this mandatory new requirement.
The mandatory one.
Yes. You must be able to issue these digital documents, they're called verifiable credentials, or VCs, in a way that is compliant and completely trusted across the entire European Union.
Okay, let's unpack this. So a verifiable credential, that's just the digital version of my passport or my university diploma.
Essentially, yes.
But it's not enough to just, drop the data into the EUDI wallet. That data has to come with a super secure digital signature, one that guarantees it's the real deal.
Right. And to provide that guarantee, that level of trust, the issuer has to get the ultimate stamp of approval.
They have to become a qualified trust service provider, a QTSP.
Exactly. That QTSP status is the trust anchor. You can think of it as a kind of specialized license. It's issued by national regulators, and it basically says, we certify that anything this organization signs digitally is, well, legally and cryptographically sound across the whole EU.
This isn't just a small tech upgrade, then.
Not at all. It is a massive strategic and regulatory hurdle that organizations have to clear to operate under the new eIDAS regulation.
And the list of who has to do this seems huge. It's everyone from the public sector all the way to private companies.
It is vast. I mean, you're talking about government authorities issuing national digital IDs. You have educational institutions dealing with digital diplomas, transcripts.
Healthcare providers.
Healthcare providers, yeah, with vaccination records, patient IDs. And then there's this huge slice of private organizations, banks issuing account verifications, large employers, professional licensing bodies. They all have to figure out how to get this QTSP status.
So the central question for all of them becomes pretty simple, right? Do we try to build this highly specialized trust machine ourselves, or do we find a partner?
And if you look at the source material, the argument against trying to build it in-house is, well, it's pretty overwhelming.
It's a strategic distraction.
That's the crucial starting point. For any leadership team, building an in-house QTSP means diverting huge amounts of money and, honestly, more importantly, your best people, your security architects, your cryptographers, away from your core mission.
Away from what your business is actually supposed to be doing.
Exactly. You suddenly find yourself becoming a compliance and trust infrastructure company first and a university or a bank second.
So what makes the burden so heavy? Because when you look at the requirements for just maintaining QTSP status, it doesn't look like a checklist. It looks more like a permanent multi-million euro project.
It absolutely is. The complexity is just staggering across 5 core domains. That's what makes the in-house build such a massive undertaking.
Okay, let's start with the regulatory side. It sounds like you need to be on guard constantly.
You do. So the first hurdle is regulatory and accreditation. Getting the status requires this really intense vetting by national and EU authorities. But here's the real kicker.
What's that?
Maintaining it. You have to be placed on your country's official EU trusted list, which is a public registry, and QTSP status is not permanent.
Not permanent.
No. You are subject to regular audits, often every single year. You can lose that status. And if you do, the entire trust foundation of your digital identity program just collapses instantly.
Wow. That auditing alone sounds like a full-time job for a whole team. Okay, then there are the technical specs for the VCs, the digital documents themselves.
Right, that's the second domain, technical and schema compliance. You can't just invent your own document format. Your VCs have to adhere to very specific global standards, like the W3C Verifiable Credentials data model.
And every single credential needs specific metadata, right?
Mandatory metadata, proof of the issuer's unique digital ID, the exact issuance dates, and so on. All has to be integrated perfectly.
And of course, since this is the EU, privacy is a huge deal. That's where the design constraints get. Well, they're innovative, but they must be incredibly complex to build from scratch.
That's domain 3, data protection and GDPR. A QTSP needs robust privacy by design from the ground up. The requirement for selective disclosure is huge here.
Can you explain that?
Sure. So if you show, say, a bouncer your digital ID to prove you're old enough, you only want to share your birth date, not your home address, not your name. The system has to support sharing only the specific attributes needed.
Which is technically very difficult.
It is. And even more demanding is the need for real-time revocation services. If a license is revoked, the person checking it needs to know instantly. But that check has to happen without violating the user's privacy.
So real-time, selective, private verification.
Yeah.
That combo alone is a serious, serious challenge.
Okay, what about the signing infrastructure, the cryptography?
Domain 4. Advanced cryptographic infrastructure. We're talking about key management at the absolute highest level of security. You need secure hardware for generating, storing, and regularly rotating the private keys that sign all the VCs.
And the algorithms have to be eIDAS compliant.
Of course, which means state-of-the-art standards, usually RSA or ECDSA. And finally, you have to scale this whole thing up for an entire country or a huge corporation.
Domain 5, scalability and reliability. If you're a national government, your system has to handle millions of transactions with, near zero latency. Failure is just not an option.
So you need massive financial backing, contingency plans.
Ironclad contingency plans. When you stack these 5 domains together, the internal resource hit is, well, it's often just not viable.
So if building it yourself is a massive strategic drain, a permanent operational headache, decision makers don't have many good options left.
Well, our sources distill this whole challenge down into 4 distinct strategic pathways.
Here's where it gets really interesting. We have to look at these 4 paths and judge them on what cost, time to market, internal resources, and organizational risk.
Exactly. Let's start with the one that, risk-averse, more legacy-type organizations might gravitate towards.
Strategy 1, the consultancy-led approach.
Right. So this is where you hand the entire certification process over to a big consulting firm. The advantage is pretty clear. They deliver a fully compliant system and, as one source put it, very pretty documentation for the auditors.
It buys you peace of mind.
It does, but the trade-offs are brutal. It is by far the slowest path, the costs are extremely high, and you run a big risk of the system being over-engineered.
You pay for things you don't even need.
Precisely. And even though you've outsourced the project management, it's still a huge drain on your internal staff who have to work with those consultants every single day.
Sounds like a classic risk management play if you have deep pockets, but you still lose a lot of time. Okay, what's the next option? It seems a bit more streamlined.
Strategy 2, the outsourcing partnership model. This is where you find an existing accredited QTSP in your region and just connect to their system.
Okay, that sounds easier.
On the surface, it looks cheaper and easier than the consultancy model. The problem is it introduces this critical risk of third-party dependency.
So you're completely reliant on them.
Completely. If that partner who holds your trust anchor has a major failure, a security breach, or even goes bankrupt, your entire digital identity framework just grinds to a halt. You're tied to their systems, their audit schedule, their financial stability.
That is a huge dependency trap for something so foundational. Okay, let's move to strategy 3, the cloud services integration model. The source material really highlights this one, calling it a worthwhile approach.
It really stands out because it tries to solve the complexity problem by just externalizing it to specialized tech providers. This strategy uses cloud-based components built specifically to handle all those QTSP compliance requirements we just talked about.
So you get the classic cloud benefits.
All of them. Immediate scalability, cost efficiency with a predictable pay-as-you-go model, enhanced security, and, built-in disaster recovery.
So if the tech is already designed from the ground up to handle those 5 domains, the key management, the selective disclosure, all of it, your time to market must be way faster.
Dramatically faster. Instead of spending years building that crypto infrastructure and getting audited, you use simple API integrations. You connect the specialized cloud service to your existing internal data systems.
And the compliance burden is basically shifted.
It's shifted to the external provider. It's their core competency to manage all of that.
And there are real-world examples of major institutions already doing this.
There are. The sources cite a Netherlands-based provider, EUDI. They offer these certified cloud-based VC signing solutions, and they're trusted by huge enterprises like KPN, the biggest telecom in the Netherlands, and even have trust certifications with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security.
So governments and large corporations are getting comfortable offloading this.
They are. They see the value in letting specialist partners handle this complex infrastructure.
Okay, finally, let's talk about the big one. Strategy 4, The strategic acquisition approach. This is just buying an existing QTSP outright.
This is the aggressive, high-risk, high-reward option. The main advantage is you get immediate time to market once the deal closes. And you instantly have the ability to not just issue your own credentials, but potentially offer commercial QTSP services to the whole market.
But the price tag, the estimate is staggering.
Yeah.
50 million EUR and up. Is that ever really justified if your only goal is internal issuance?
It would be highly inefficient, no. That cost only makes sense if the organization, let's say a major global bank or a tech giant, sees commercial QTSP services as a whole new revenue stream.
And even then, there are warnings.
Big warnings. The sources explicitly mention high capital risk, and they cite a potential market bubble bursting in this space. It is definitely not for the faint-hearted. It requires huge capital and the expertise to integrate a completely separate, highly regulated company.
Okay, let's synthesize this. Let's look across the board at these 4 strategies.
Well, if we line them up, the consultancy-led model is slow and incredibly expensive, but you get nice documents.
Right.
Outsourcing is cheaper, but you're taking on immense third-party risk. And strategic acquisition gives you speed, but you face this astronomical capital barrier and market risk.
Which leaves the cloud services model standing out. It seems to have clear advantages across the key metrics.
It does. It's identified as the most cost-efficient, the fastest path to compliance, and it requires the lowest internal resource impact.
Because you're leveraging an expert to do the heavy lifting.
The regulatory and cryptographic heavy lifting, yes. The main challenge noted is that the vendor market for these services is still a bit limited, but that is changing very quickly.
So the takeaway seems to be that while there's no perfect one-size-fits-all solution, the cloud model offers the most pragmatic path for most.
I think so, yes. The optimal choice always depends on context and your strategic goal. But for organizations whose core business is not, and really shouldn't be, cryptography, the cloud-based model's relative simplicity and efficiency make a very strong case.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, and for your organization? You really have to move beyond just the technical details and ask some deep strategic questions that this regulation brings up.
The first one is the big one, the existential one, core business focus. Does building and constantly maintaining this highly regulated trust service, does it genuinely align with our core mission, or is it just a complex, expensive, resource-draining distraction?
Question 2 is about money and risk. Financial and risk appetite. What is your organization's tolerance for that high upfront capital cost and the long-term operational risk of owning this infrastructure versus the predictability of an operational cost model like a cloud service?
Then question 3 is about timing, speed and agility. How critical is it for you to be ready for the EUDI Wallet? How fast do you need to be compliant? Because if the answer is tomorrow, then really acquisition or the cloud are your only viable options.
And finally, question 4, control versus dependency. How comfortable are you relying on a specialized third party for such a critical function like digital trust versus shouldering the full, permanent internal burden of compliance, security, and staying ahead of the cryptographic curve?
Making this decision deliberately is absolutely essential. This choice doesn't just determine your eIDAS compliance. It fundamentally shapes your organization's future, its ability to compete in this new digital identity ecosystem in the EU.
Given the intense regulatory pressure, those 5 complex domains we went through, and the clear preference in the sources for outsourcing the hard technical stuff to cloud platforms, it feels like we're watching a profound strategic shift.
What do you mean?
It suggests that this kind of specialized trust infrastructure is becoming a utility, like electricity or cloud computing itself.
Absolutely. If organizations are consistently choosing to, in effect, rent access to the QTSP function instead of building or buying it at huge costs because the maintenance burden is just too high, it completely changes the idea of what an internal core competency even is.
Exactly. If the trust anchor itself becomes a utility you just plug into, then the main strategic focus for organizations shifts entirely. It moves away from security infrastructure and moves towards data quality and just designing really good use cases for these VCs.
So you're no longer judged on how well you manage private keys.
No. You're judged on how accurate and useful the data you're signing really is. That's the new competitive landscape for digital identity. Something for you to consider as you figure out your own pathway to QTSP status.